So today, we're going straight to the source to understand a really key narrative in a global conflict. We're going to break down the document that Hamas released in January 2024. It's titled Our Narrative, Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, and it lays out their own justification for the October 7th attack.
And right at the very beginning, the document states its purpose loud and clear. This is a direct address to the world, and its goal is to establish its own narrative and, as it says, counter Israeli allegations. So, to really understand the case it's making, we're just going to follow the argument exactly as it's presented. All right, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the document itself, then dive into its historical justification for the attack. After that, we'll look at its counter-narrative of the event, how it actually defines itself, and finally, what it's demanding from the world. Okay, first things first. What exactly is this document? Well, it's a piece of political communication. You have to see it as a primary source that's designed not just to explain, but really to persuade an international audience. Now, this is absolutely crucial. The document doesn't start its story on October 7th. Not at all. To build its case, it reaches back over a century, and it frames the attack as the, inevitable result of a really long history of grievances. So the document builds this very specific historical narrative. It flags 1918, then the 1948 establishment of Israel, which it calls an ethnic cleansing campaign, followed by the 1967 occupation, and finally the response to the 2018 Gaza border protests. These are all presented as these key, painful moments in what it describes as 105 years of oppression. And to ground these claims of oppression in something concrete, the document uses data to quantify the human cost. It cites this number, 11,299, as the total number of Palestinians killed by what it terms the Israeli occupation just between the year 2000 and September of 2023. Okay, so after setting that long historical stage, the document zooms way in on the immediate triggers. It argues that these specific factors, everything from plans for the Al-Aqsa Mosque to the ongoing Gaza blockade to the complete failure of the peace process, basically created a powder keg where action became inevitable. And all of that history, all those triggers, they all build up to the climax of its historical argument. The document frames the attack not as an act of aggression, but as a defensive and necessary response. The logical outcome of the conditions it just spent all that time laying out. All right, next, the document pivots. It shifts from the why to the how. It dedicates a pretty big section to presenting its version of what happened on October 7th. With the goal of directly dismantling what's become the mainstream narrative. And this is where the document draws a really sharp line in the sand. It states its goal was purely military, to hit Israeli army sites and capture soldiers, to use as leverage for a prisoner exchange. But then it claims that any harm to civilians was completely unintentional, an accidental byproduct of the rapid collapse of the Israeli security and military system, and just the chaos that erupted. From there, it goes point by point, trying to knock down specific allegations. It calls avoiding civilian harm a religious and moral commitment. It dismisses the 40 beheaded baby story as a total fabrication. It flatly denies allegations of mass rape. And crucially, it argues that a lot of Israeli civilian deaths were actually caused by friendly fire from Israeli forces in the confusion. Now, this point is absolutely central to their counter-narrative. The document specifically cites Israeli newspapers like Haaretz and Yedioth Ahronoth to back up its claim that an Israeli military helicopter fired on both its fighters and the festival attendees, causing many of the civilian casualties there. The document also makes the very serious accusation that the Israeli army invoked its controversial Hannibal Directive. Now, it claims this protocol basically means better a dead civilian hostage or soldier than taken alive, and alleges it led Israeli forces to kill their own citizens to stop them from being captured. So, after justifying its actions, the document kind of turns the camera on itself. It takes time to define its own identity for the world, laying out its ideology and its purpose. This right here is Hamas's official self-definition, taken directly from the document. And the choice of words is very deliberate. National Liberation and Resistance Movement. That language is strategically chosen,
for sure, to place the group within a global history of anti-colonial struggles.
Then, the document draws a really critical distinction. It asserts its conflict is with the Zionist project, which it frames as a political, colonial thing and not with Jewish people because of their religion. It explicitly says it rejects anti-Semitism and that it opposes occupiers, not Jews.
And this brings us to a key legal framing in their argument. The document doesn't portray its actions as unlawful at all. Instead, it argues that its actions are sanctioned by international law. It claims that UN resolutions legitimize armed resistance as a right for any people who are living under occupation. And finally, the document doesn't just end with justifications. It concludes with a direct call to action, presenting a pretty clear set of demands to the entire international community. So it lays out these 5 core demands as its proposed path forward. 1. An immediate halt to the war. 2. Legal accountability for Israel. 3. International support for Palestinian resistance. 4. Full self-determination for Palestinians. And 5. A global effort to end the occupation entirely. So there you have it. We've just walked through the narrative that Hamas has presented to the world. Now, our goal here wasn't to validate it or to debunk it, but simply to understand its structure and its arguments directly from the source. And this leaves us with a really critical question. In a conflict that's just saturated with information and misinformation, how does analyzing a primary document like this, one side's carefully constructed story, challenge or maybe even reinforce our own understanding of what's happening?